शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। अथाश्वलायनो भगवन्तं परमेष्ठिनमुपसमेत्योवाच अधीहि भगवन् ब्रह्मविद्यां वरिष्ठां सदा सद्भिः सेव्यमानां निगूढाम् यया चिरात् सर्वपापं व्यपोह्य परात् परं पुरुषं याति विद्वान् तस्मै स होवाच पितामहश्च श्रद्धा भक्तिध्यानयोगादवैः न कर्मणा न प्रजया धनेन त्यागेनैके अमृतत्वमानशुः परेण नाकं निहितं गुहायां विभ्राजते यद्यतयो विशन्ति वेदान्तविज्ञानसुनिश्चितार्थाः सन्न्यासयोगाद्यतयः शुद्धसत्त्वाः ते ब्रह्मलोकेषु परान्तकाले परामृतात् परिमुच्यन्ति सर्वे विविक्तदेशे च सुखासनस्थः शुचिः समग्रीव शिरः शरीरः अत्याश्रमस्थः सकलेन्द्रियाणि निरुध्य भक्त्या स्वगुरुं प्रणम्य हृत्पुण्डरीकं विरजं विशुद्धं विचिन्त्य मध्ये विशदं विशोकम् अचिन्त्यमव्यक्तमनन्तरूपं शिवं प्रशान्तममृतं ब्रह्मयोनिम् तथादिमध्यान्तविहीनमेकं विभुं चिदानन्दमरूपमद्भुतम् उमासहायं परमेश्वरं प्रभुं त्रिलोचनं नीलकण्ठं प्रशान्तम् ध्यात्वा मुनिर्गच्छति भूतयोनिं समस्तसाक्षिं तमसः परस्तात् स ब्रह्मा स शिवस्येन्द्रः सोऽक्षरः परमस्वराट् स एव विष्णुः स प्राणः स कालोऽग्निः स चन्द्रमाः स एव सर्वं यद्भूतं यच्च भव्यं सनातनम् ज्ञात्वा तं मृत्युमत्येति नान्यः पन्था विमुक्तये सर्वभूतस्थमात्मानं सर्वभूतानि चात्मनि सम्पश्यन् ब्रह्म परमं याति नान्येन हेतुना.
So the mantra 4 gives the concept of Brahmaloka. It talks about the highest realm of experience, which is Brahmaloka, and the grandest extent of time, which is given here as Parantakale. So he is indicating about those people who go after their death in this Loka, they go to Brahmaloka, they stay there for till the end of time, after which they attain realization. So this portion of the Upanishad is talking about a concept called Krama Mukti. We will come to that. Before that, we need to understand what this heaven and the other lokas are all about. we talked about the calculations of time and space in the last class, and these are given elaborately in various Puranas, etc. See, it is said to be 7 lokas above and 7 lokas below. There are 14 lokas, it is said. And the lokas above are indicated as heavenly lokas, and the lokas that are below are lower, which is equivalent to hell, different grades of hell. This is what is given. Now, naturally the question arises from a normal person's perspective that do these lokas really exist at all? Is there any proof or is there any corroborative evidences which make us think that there can be a possibility like that? What should be our stance? Strictly speaking, there is no physical proof. It is not visible to our senses like this world that we experience. When it comes to theory of reincarnation in Vedanta, we say it is a theory. We say it is a theory and say that it cannot be proven. But the theory is something which is deduced scientifically, and it gives all, let's say, corroborative evidences to believe in that, but it cannot be proven. That is a theory. There is a difference between a theory and a law. Law is something which is scientifically established, and it is experimented and it can be proven, and it works every time. So external laws like law of gravity is a law. Law of diminishing marginal utility is a law. All these laws are based on cause and effect. So law of causation is a law. Based on that law of causation, law of karma, how you project and understand whether there is a birth after death is theory of reincarnation, because nobody can exactly pinpoint what happens after death. So upon auditing of accounts of death and birth at various circumstances, the rishis came up with a conclusion that everything is not ending at the time of death, and there has to be a continuation, and we see distinct qualities at the time of birth which could not have come out of nothing. When you connect these two, a distinct possibility of reincarnation is there. But nobody can say there is, or nobody can, obviously they can't say there is not also. So we leave it at that, and for you to imagine and understand. And then there are sentences given in Shastras which corroborate that. They talk about reincarnation in various places in Gita and other texts. So, and those who have Shraddha in this, their belief is further grounded. So this is theory. Exactly the same way, which is connected to this is there a loka called heaven, hell, etc. apart from what we experience here? Nobody can say there is, nobody can say there is not. It's a realm beyond our physical experiences here. But then again, if we scientifically deduce certain things and have Shraddha in the words that are given in the Shastras, then we may come to a conclusion that a possibility of the other lokas cannot be ruled out in that sense. It cannot be ruled out. You cannot definitely take a stance that there is or there is not. So, what is it that we, or how is it that we can understand the possibility of other lokas? See, first of all, we have to understand, and those who quote that there are no lokas, etc., and they swear by science, etc., you have to understand that we should never try to fit in what we study in Vedanta or in the realm of spirituality into science, into the parameters of science. The parameters of science is something different, and the scope of study of Vedanta and other scriptures is something different. It is not the onus upon us to fit it into the framework of science, because science is still evolving. the realm of study of science is different and the realm of study of scriptures is different. That basic thing must be first understood. What is happening in the world, what is happening in the perceptible world, to explain that is science. The realm of operation of or understanding of the Shastras is imperceptible world. With reference to your own internal world, the laws of the mind, the laws of the intellect and their respective experiences, and beyond that which is Atma or Brahman or God, that is the scope. So the scope of the Shastras is to explain the imperceptible world, about our thoughts, about our mind, about our emotions, and the practices that lead us towards the transcendental reality, which is actually imperceptible. Yet there also the knowledge begins from the known to the unknown. That is the proper knowledge. So the words Swarga, Naraka and all other related words are appearing in Shastras only. So these words itself we learn from the Shastras only. Science is not talking about heaven and hell in the first place. How do we understand this from our relatively known experience is that whether these lokas do exist or are they geographical places or not, are they some other realms of experience. Loka means realm of experience. Realm of experience is called as loka. Lokyate drishyate loka. In Tamil also there is a word for world as par. Par means see. So lokyate drishyate, that means what you see and experience is the world. Now this is not with reference to just what we physically perceive here also, because the instrument of experience is your subtle body. So as long as the subtle body is there, experience is there. So in our known experience, what is the realm of experience that we go through apart from this world? Dream. Now if I ask you this question, dream is called Swapnas, or the dream world you can say Swapna Loka. Swapna Loka, is it a geographical entity, a geographical place? You cannot say. Geographical place means the term geographical refers to that which is centered around the world or in the world. You can extend it in this context to cover all the space that we see, etc. The entire perceptible universe that you see is like a geographical place. But analyze carefully. The dream is existing as long as you are dreaming, after which it dissolves. We do not know where it is now, so you cannot really pinpoint whether there is a dream world now, which you experienced last. You may go through another dream tonight, that's different. But the dream, as long as it was existing, where was it happening? It was happening somewhere in your bosom, right? When you are sleeping, even though we may say the scope of the dream is a bigger universe, etc. Okay, but the locus of the dream is centered in your gross body. When you are sleeping, it is centered there. How do we say that it is locused in your gross body? Is when there is a expression of dream which is very big enough, it impacts the gross body. We do see that the expression of dream transcends the dream and shakes your body, right? That means there is a connection. So we can say that dream is somewhere here. We do not know where, but the locus is somewhere here, along with the realm of thoughts. And your body is obviously in the bed, and the bed is obviously in the house wherever it is, and it is in the city, in this world. But can we connect like this and say it is a geographical entity? We cannot. It's a different loka by itself. It is a realm of experience, experienced by the mind only, where this body really doesn't participate. So it's a different loka by itself. Yet we go through that experience. So in our known experience, if dream is a sort of a proof that there can be a different realm of experience while you are living in this body itself, when you go to sleep, exactly the same way you cannot rule out some other experience after your death. Death is like another sleep only. Just as you go through sleep on a daily basis, This daily basis, if you extend it to one lifetime is one waking state. After that one waking state, what happens is that by natural law of order, you have to go to sleep. That sleep is called as death. In that sleep, you can go through dream or deep sleep. Exactly the same way, in this death also, you can go through dream or deep sleep. So heaven, hell are experiences like dream. Like dream. So therefore, you cannot rule out the possibility of this heaven or hell and say they are just mere states of mind in this world only. Of course, it is also correct. States of mind means when you go through an extreme happy state of mind in this world for a phase also, that's heaven. We were there in the academy for a week or more. Obviously, it's a proof I have done some punya karma in the last 6 months or so, which is a realm of heaven. After which, what happens? You have to come back. So it is a very clear experience for us also that there is a realm of heaven that is possible. Incidentally, absence of this person here could be a heaven for others who are here also. So it is actually a state of mind. What you experience is your state of mind. When that state of mind is happy, it is smooth, you are like floating, that state of mind is called as heaven. So there are different grades, obviously, that a person can be extremely happy, relatively happy. There are various grades of happiness that you can say, all this is heaven. Exactly the same way, a person when he is going through agitation, it is hell. It is hell. A person who is going through extreme trouble, it is a hellish state of mind. So, heaven and hell are experienceable in this world itself. And that can also be termed as heaven and hell. But we need not just confine to that only. Now, what is the basic difference between experiencing that here and what we call as lokas is something like this. Again, take the dream example. Dream example says that you go through the motions in the dream according to the undigested thought of the waking state, and it's all again dependent on your vasanas only. Those vasanas which needs exhaustion, you go through that in the dream. So the dream can be sometimes very pleasant, sometimes normal, sometimes mixed, sometimes very bad or a nightmare, something like that. All that depends on the type of experiences you have gone through in the day, and the resultant of that comes through there. But you have to go through and exhaust it there. There is no scope of escaping from that. You have to go through that, and that can, it can be that you are even suffering for a longer period, but its dream is just a small period of 5 minutes or so, or few minutes. But you are actually suffering for years together, it's possible in the dream. Or you are going through extreme pleasant experience for long time in the dream. It's few minutes only. So that the differentiation of time is obviously there. But it is according to what you have asked for that you have to go through. At the time that you are going through, there is no other choice but to go through. And you as a dreamer have no choice to put in special effort to alter the course of the dream or something like that. There is meaning there is no self-effort possible there to consciously evolve or devolve. You have to go through, which is, we can say, a resultant of various actions of the past coming together as an experience that you have to go through. So it is a mini prarabdha that you are going through there. You have to exhaust it. You have to exhaust it through experience. Now, all these have already been accrued and accumulated. The fruits of action have already come about. Once they have fructified like that, there is no way that you can escape from it. You had only choice to do the action. You had no choice to not enjoy or escape from the fruits of action. You are bound by the fruits of action. Of course, there is enough time gap even given before the fruits of action actually fructify, where you can even do counter actions to make it like a mixed fruit later on. But if you are accounting on a one-to-one basis, it will come. But once a set of fruit of actions has fructified, you have to go through. Exactly like that. if you expand it for the whole lifetime, you have committed certain karmas, positive, negative, all put together, and that fruits of those actions, if it is not accounted for in this lifetime, and if they are fructified in such a way that you have to go through that experience, then you will go through that and you have no choice over that after it has fructified. That realm of fructification is hell or heaven according to your karma phala. So if a person has lived a very generous and unselfish life, he will go through heaven. If a person has lived a egocentric, selfish life full of agitations, he will go through hell because he has caused agitations to others. He has to go through that. So while going through these realms of heaven or hell, you have no choice but to go through it. It is sort of imposed upon you, meaning you have asked for it. You have bought the ticket and you have boarded the plane. Now there is no way that you are going to get down. After all the exhaustion there, then you are coming back here where you have a choice to put in positive and negative actions. So a conscious choice of action towards evolution or devolution is possible only in this loka, which is Martya Loka, the loka of mortality, death. All other lokas are lokas of experience where you have to go through the experience. So therefore we cannot rule out such a possibility. From our own experiences we can project it, and also whatever is the descriptions that are given in Puranas about the enjoyments that you go through there, which are multifold, or the punishments that you go through which are very torturous, those also we can see here in this world and then project further. See, it is said that you will be boiled in oil, burning oil there in hell. You see that happening maybe in your own house sometimes when you are doing some savory or something and the oil is there in a big vessel, a fly or something falls into it. What it is going through at that point of time? It's actually a torturous experience, maybe for a second, maybe for 2 seconds, but it is going through. A person who is coming with a lot of cash from the bank, 2 people are seeing it and they just stab him to death, and it is he is resisting, and they just drag him on the road because he is not giving the money. And what he is going through that period of time, maybe he is going through a torturous death. Actually he is going through what is described like what is given in the hell. We see some people born in luxury, they have never even known what is to be not without AC. Why even when there are some dogs also who go through that experience. See, imagine we see a normal dog, it is trying to eat wherever food is available, it is searching for it, or it has to escape the traffic, it has to be afraid of the truck or the car that is coming on the road. That is the life of a dog, normal dog that we see. But sometimes some dog which has that very exclusive experience of being in the lap of a aristocrat all the time. He has a separate car and a driver for itself. Wherever it goes in a car and comes. It is served, let's say, in a silver plate or something like that, whatever it is eating. And it's going through ultra luxury throughout its life. It is, in a way, going through heaven. That is, like that. So it is possible that we see that happening in this world. So if I know that there is a city like Calcutta, I cannot confine all my experience just to Calcutta and say this is everything. It is like then frog in the well. There can be a better city than this. There can be a bigger city than this. There can be a more beautiful city than this, even in this world. And there can be a worse city than this. There can be a city which is more congested than this, more polluted than this in this world. So there is always gradation in this world. So now if you expand this with reference to the whole world, can there be not a possibility of a better world than this? It is possible. Can there be not a worse world than this? It is possible. So we cannot rule out that possibility of the realm of heaven and hell like this. Now, when do we go to this heaven? We said that the 3 lokas, there are 7 lokas given: Bhuhu, Bhuvaha, Suvaha. Janaha, Mahaha, Tapaha, Satyam. Satyaloka is Brahmaloka. 7 worlds from Bhu, this loka, till Brahmaloka is 7 lokas. In the Gayatri Mantra we say Bhur Bhuva Swaha. It is talking about the 3 Vyahritis, Bhur, Bhuvaha and Swaha. The Sapta Vyahriti means 7 Vyahritis is the remaining 4. Put together is 7. So, it is said that these 3 lokas come under the realm of the sun god, Surya Mandala. So that is why in the Gayatri Mantra these 3 are given. Subjectively how to take it we will see further, but objectively this is what is the 3 lokas that are given. Bhuloka refers to this world. Shuvarloka refers to the Swargaloka. Bhuvarloka represents all that in between. Okay. Now, when a person does karma, the karma can be, we know, generally classified into selfish, unselfish and selfless karma. As a general formula, we can say a person when he does actions directed just to himself, me and myself, extremely egocentric in nature, that is called as selfish karma. But when he is able to think of others and with a very good desire he is performing deeds for the welfare of others, it is unselfish karma. It is unselfish. It's all depending on your thought, your attitude, not actually what you do. A person can even take a class like this on Upanishads or Gita and be extremely selfish. It's possible. A person can do an office job and do it in an extremely unselfish way. So it is not really what we do that matters, it's our attitude, our thought that matters. So for myself it is selfish, for others self it is unselfish, for no self it is selfless. No self means no self in the world, it is for the supreme self only. It's called Nishkama Karma, no desires, desireless action. So how to do desireless action, it is a very rare and it's very tough. So we can now try to concentrate to take our actions from selfish to unselfish. And a stage will come where you are totally dedicating your actions towards self-realization. There to perform Nishkama Karma is absolutely natural. At the present stature, we may do inspired activities like that once in a while, but not on a regular basis. And the moment we say karma, remember this, even if you are doing Nishkama Karma, remember that karma is something that is done in the world for the sake of somebody. See, even as you do Nishkama Karma, it can be thought out in terms of how it will benefit others. A person who is doing just what he ought to do, obviously it is going to benefit somebody else in the world. That is what is the scope of karma. So karma is expression oriented. Karma is extroverted, action oriented. Okay, in that there are various gradations, that about all. But karma is like this. So the karma that you do and the result of the karma, which is punya, which is meritorious deeds, which has resulted in the help of others. You can help them materially, you can help them physically, various gradations. You can help them emotionally, you can help them at the level of intellect, you can help others at the level of spirituality. As various gradations are there, various types of merits do accrue to you. So therefore, the results of these actions that you have to exhaust is what is known as Swarga. So in the Swarga is a loka that you normally go to exhaust punya karma. So it is associated with karma. This is the main point that you have to remember here. There are certain actions which are extraordinarily meritorious that may even get you lokas beyond Swargaloka also, up to Brahmaloka also. Yet, whatever loka you attain because of karma, it is subject to return. It is said that a person who gives his daughter in marriage to a Vedic scholar who has studied Vedas properly for whatever period, 15, not Vedanta Academy, no, Vedic scholar. No, I'm just joking, it is possible, we don't know. Vedic scholar who has done the proper Vedic study in the proper way under a proper guru in the traditional way, and he has dedicated himself to that. A person who gives his daughter to such a person, his karma is gaining him Brahmaloka, is said. But it is a result of karma again. Okay? It's maybe a tremendous deed. It's a great meritorious deed. And it can acquire him a X amount of punya, which is more than any other karma, let's say. But after that is exhausted, he has to come back again here. That is why in the 8th chapter, I gave you the reference, you can go through. It says, Brahma Bhuvana Lokan Punaravartino Arjuna. Brahma Bhuvana Loka. Up to Brahma Loka, O Arjuna, Punaravartino Arjuna. O Arjuna, it is subject to return. Here it is something different. Here he says, Te Brahma Lokeshu Paranta Kale Paramritat Parimuchanti Sarve. So, the formula is this, that whatever results accrue to you based on your karma, it is subject to return. It is subject to coming back. Obviously, when this is there is no discussion about hell at all, because in selfish, you cannot do anything except selfish karma only. And in selfish karma also, you go through extreme troubles and difficulties, after exhausting which you will come back. It can be even for longer and longer periods. But one thing is a very soothing thought in our philosophy or our dharma is that there is no such thing as eternal hell. You can go through for longer time. In 16th chapter, Krishna says, Tanaham dvishata kruran samsareshu naradaman. He's talking about condemnation to hell, right here. Tanaham dvishata kruran samsareshu naradaman kshipamya jasram ashubhan ashurishveshva yonishu and trividam narakasyedam dwaram nashayam atmanaha kamam krodastata lobaha tasmat yetatrayam tajet. So he is saying, I'll cast them to hell, and these are the 3 gateways to hell. There are hell, that is all given here. But what we have to understand is it's not eternal. And then there's no chance of redemption at all. No. There is always chance of redemption. And there are various gradations. Up to Patala, it goes like that, it is. So therefore, so there's no discussion of selfish karma or papa here. There is no discussion at all. The discussion here is about only punya karma, meritorious actions which are desired done actions. So these desired done actions, when a person does, he goes to Swargaloka, enjoys everything, and he comes back. This is the normal. Very rare case, you can go to higher lokas. That is why that lokas are also named accordingly. Tapoloka means when you do tapas, you go there. When you do various other higher upasanas, you go there, like that it is. So up to action, it is Swargaloka normally. Now, when a person is relatively exhausted his karma, when I say relatively, he is not self-realized, he is operating at a different realm, he is now more introverted, maybe he has reached the stage of sannyas, where it is a mental renunciation, where there is no pravritti for him to get into the world and act. Such a person who is more introvert, his thoughts going towards the self or God is much more powerful and easier and natural. When he does upasana means worship. And in worship, upa means near, asana means seat. So as though you are seating yourself nearer to Brahman. So these internal sadhanas which take you where the thought is centered around the self, which essentially is based on bhakti, is called as upasana. Upasana means worship, it's bhakti. So when a person is doing that, that also gets him results. I would recommend that you even go through the chapter of After Death, All Religions Reconciled by Swami Ramatirtha. he sort of explains this in a different way. So if a person, let us say he even talks about a very true Christian who believes in Jesus Christ, who in all the lifetime he extends unconditional love to others, and he is imagining himself to be seated next to Christ all the time, which is what his Shraddha is. What will happen to such a person who has lived such a life? He will actually get seated next to Christ, having done this type of, having led this type of a life. Now, in Upasana, what happens is that you are able to visualize something, because for Bhakti, a form when it is there, it is much easier. Okay? And when in the form, with the form you are relating and doing certain things, it is quite natural that according to your resultant of that, you will go through certain experiences which are conducive for that. But what is the difference between Upasana and Karma is that in a meritorious Karma, you are doing certain deeds, exhaustion after which you are elevated, but you have to come here and perform your these things again. You are continue with your life again. But if a person is deeply immersed in Upasana, he is subject to experiencing a higher type of joy, a different qualitative joy, because Swarga, it is said to be, let us say, a difference in degree as far as this world is concerned. Whatever you go through super sensuous enjoyment here, a different multiplication of that is various levels of Swarga, etc. it is given. But whatever enjoyment that you go through practices of bhakti or tapas or various other things here, even for a shorter term that you experience, because it's qualitatively different, you multiply that into 10 times, 100 times, 1000 times. This is what you will go through there if you have done enough sadhana for that here. So Upasana and other practices which are introverted is directly associated with your thought associating with God. And karma is not ruled out, but karma is an initial step that is required for us. Karma is required for us to cleanse our heart, to make chitta shuddhi. It is to purify our heart, then to qualify for upasana and dhyana on a continuous basis becomes easier. And also remember, it is not a black and white thing. Even as a person does karma, he will do upasana and dhyana also, but karma will predominate. And upasana and dhyana, etc. will be proportionately less. Even at a higher level, he will do karma, but that will be relatively less. His introverted practices will be more. So it is obviously not black and white, that you do karma up to 50 years, then finish everything and start dhyana. Nothing like that happens. It is a simultaneous practice. But predominance of karma is there initially. Predominance of jnana is there in the later stage. Right. So when a person is doing upasana, worship, he can subject himself to higher stages. I really do not know if that is not good enough for realization. Again, from there also he can come back. He will continue, but maybe he will start at a very high level. It can continue. But if he has exhausted all the sadhana that is required for realization, and yet he has to go through the realm of experience as a resultant of his upasana, he will go through that realm in what is known as Brahmaloka. Here it is Brahmaloka. Okay, it's a higher world. And there what he does, because of his resultant of all his lifetime, the thought has been associated with God and he has been enjoying that pleasure. That same continuous pleasure he is enjoying there also. He continues to enjoy it there. There's no pleasure other than, except the thought of God in some form or the other, it is there. That is why we said in the last class, Dhruva is between Saptarishi Mandal all the time. What can be a greater pleasure than to be in the satsang of the rishis themselves? You have no other choice but to beautifully go through that experience. But in this case, what happens? Parantakale. Parantakale means at the end of time, which is the end of the life of this Brahma, calculating that ways, the entire what you see as creation goes into dissolution, and then after an equivalent period of time, again when the creation comes, this person does not get reincarnated again or born again in any form of jiva. He has finished his journey and he has merged with the self entirely. That is called as Krama Mukti. Krama Mukti means it is in stages. It is in the stage here, then it stage in the higher world, and then finally at the end of the time it goes. This is a beautiful concept. You have to digest the concept by the definition that it is given here. Sadhyo Mukti or Kaivalya Mukti or direct liberation is what is recommended, is what is difficult, but it is what we must try to achieve it here and now. When a person is constantly focused towards the self here, he is not enamored by anything that is selfish or unselfish. He is constantly oriented towards self-realization only, uncompromising thought flow towards that. That means he is practicing dhyana. A person is practicing single-pointed meditation on the self here. He is not really interested in the meritorious accruing which comes in the Swarga. So obviously he is not interested in the karma phala also. He is not interested in the in any form of a higher realm of experience which is totally different, which is to be with the gods and serving there, those type of things also. That means it is more or less we can confine it to or pinpoint it to a straightforward nirguna dhyana. A person who is constantly visualizing the self only in its absolute form. When I say absolute form, a formless reality, and then all his sadhana is oriented towards that, open eye or closed eye, his focus is only that. Such a person who puts on an uncompromising effort, he attains Kaivalya Mukti here and now. Here and now means while living in this world itself, he becomes a Jivan Mukta, he has merged with the self. So there are three distinct paths that are discussed here in general. One is the path towards Swargaloka, which is the path of return, where you go because of karma, meritorious deeds. And definitely Punya Karma is lot better than any other karma. Let us be clear about that at that level, but it has its limitations. You go through that merits in the Swargaloka and then you have to come back. This is indicated in Bhagavad Gita as the path of moon. Path of moon this is. And then the second is Krama Mukti, where it is the path of sun, where you mix your sadhana with upasana and maybe certain nishkama karma, I really do not know, where it does not just give you a exhaustion of karma and coming back, where you have to go through based on whatever you have done, you have to go through that. And it's a beautiful realm of experience where you are experiencing a different qualitative joy, short of infinite joy, let's say. That type of a joy which we can rarely experience here with a satsang, with immersed in bhakti, where you are sometimes one with God, that type of a joy on a longer basis. And it is said Paranta Kali, up to the end of time you do that. And remember one thing, all these that you have to go through, there is not that this person is going to regret or anything. It is like he is happily continuing to do whatever he has been doing. That sort of a thing only gets you there. But he has finished all the sadhana as far as self-realization is concerned. So there is no question of him coming back into this realm of life and death here. At the end of time, when the entire thing gets dissolved, he goes into and merges into Brahman as it were. And when the next set of creation or whatever happens, then he is not reincarnated according to his karma, etc. The third is Kaivalya Mukti or direct liberation. Direct liberation is the most recommended thing for any spiritual sadhaka. It is the most difficult, but we have to be inspired by that. We have to be inspired by a constant focus, ananya chinta, on the Lord only, on the self only. And anything, any action, any form of worship or any sadhana for that matter, which does not take you there, reject it. Anything that it takes you there, accept it and do it. That sort of an uncompromising attitude. When a person does the sadhana like that, and then obviously he will get into a single pointed meditation. He is going to attain self-realization here and now. All these things function on the basis of the rule, as you think, so you become. He is constantly thinking of the self, and if he is able to clear off all other thoughts and merge into self here and now, that is called as Kaivalya Mukti or direct liberation. So these are the three things. In this verse, mantra, what he is giving indication about is the Krama Mukti. With reference to Swamiji's interpretation, we can say the third mantra is talking about Kaivalya Mukti and the fourth mantra is talking about Krama Mukti. Te Brahma Lokeshu Paranta Kale Paramritat. Paramritat is the key word there. So Paramritat means from transcendental immortality. So that means what you go through in Brahmaloka is actually immortality. From that immortality, what is the higher immortality? So that means it is a stage where you go through Brahma's age. If you calculate, it is immortal. You can say it is immortal. So he is going to be with Brahma, as it were. So till Brahma is there, you are there, means you are immortal. That is immortality. Paramritat, from that immortality, Parimuchyanti Sarve. From there you are liberated. That means he is talking about that final merger later. This is called as Krama Mukti. Now, if a person is not comfortable with the thought of the lokas, etc., because you say that spacecrafts have gone everywhere, and with the telescopes, even we know the realms which are not known to us before. There's no scope of any activities of any Swarga or anything as it is given here. If people argue like that, we really need not go and convince them, as it were. But you can understand it philosophically. That, in Swargaloka and all, we have heard the stories in Puranas that one day there is like 1 year here. Isn't it? In the story of Puri Jagannath, I think it is that the king is starting the project of the temple in Nilachal, right? And then Indra calls him. He is very happy about this work, and he calls him there. For a day or so, he spends time there, and he comes back. It is the story. By which time, many generations have passed here. Not a day, okay. 1 year he is there. 1 year he is enjoying heaven, and he is coming back. By which time, many generations have passed here. He is not able to even trace the temple. And then he is going on a horse, and it trips and falls. And that is actually the Kalasha on the tower of the Jagannath temple. And then they remove all the sand and they find the temple there. And he says, this is what I have built. And his many generations later, whoever is the king now, he says, yes, nobody is able to relate to what he says. Then there is a giant turtle which is there. He says, what he says is right. It has lived through all this years. A turtle is something which lives long. This is a story. So various stories we know that 1 day is here, etc. So what does it mean philosophically? That is why even in terms of geographical place, where is Swarga located? It is said it is in the north of North Pole. North of North Pole is Swargaloka. It is said geographically. Don't go there. We'll find only polar bear there. Nothing else. Yeah. And south of South Pole is Naraka. Naraka or hell is a place. See, go by the formula that is given here. It is said that these three lokas are in the realm of sunlight. Bhur, Bhuva and Suvaha. But South Pole sun does reach in where it is winter in the north, it's summer in the south. Like that it reaches. South of South Pole is Pitruloka. It is Pitruloka.
And that's why it points south.
South. Yama's Loka is there. That's why in south you don't do Namaskar except during the time of the death. On that day you do. Even in Tamil, the Pitrus are called as Tenpulatar. Tenpulatar means those who are in the south. They are referring to the Pitrus. And Vadapulatar means Devas who are in the north. Pitrus are not anything inferior or something. It is said that that's why in the Shraddha ceremony on the 12th day, after 10 days of rituals, 11th day is the Shapandi Karanam, and 12th day the subtle body reaches the Pitruloka and joins there. That is the belief. Okay, after his exhaustion through various stages there, then he, according to his meritorious deeds, he goes to Swarga. That is why the son who does the Shraddha ceremony, etc., is actually elevating. Then the second generation elevates him to next stage, third stage, like that. So these three stages are indicated in Shraddha ceremony as the seat of Vasu, Rudra and Aditya. This. So the father stage is Vasu stage, then grandfather is the Rudra stage, then the Aditya stage, like that. These are all matter of detail. Now, when you say, incidentally, since you have talked about Naraka, if it is a geographical place, where can it be then?
Below the sea. Under the ground.
Yeah, it can be. We can project it that way. Correct. Asurya, Loka, and you know, even if you take it literally, diameter of Earth is something of phenomenal distance. You know, we do not know what the center of Earth and how it is. It is a very interesting thought. Now, don't try to dig deep and see what it is. But when there are certain fish and other things which live. They show in the National Geographic Channel. Let's say it cannot be as deep as Mariana Trench, but even somewhere near that, the sun's rays doesn't penetrate there. Those fish don't have eyes. It is actually living in a sunless world. Like that, we can see it happening in front of our eyes, like that it is. So it is interesting when it goes deeper and deeper, like that could be, because it is unimaginable to see a circle which is having this side darkness and that side light, because when the movement of the sun and earth is there, it is there everywhere. So it has to be something concentric inside. Now, philosophically speaking, when a person goes through extreme happiness, time actually shrinks. Time shrinks. So, if a person that is because in happiness the mind gets totally into it, absorbed into it, that experience. Once you get totally absorbed into that experience, you do not know the time. It just passes away. Vis-a-vis, when you go through a very tough experience, you'll always, only 5 minutes have gone. You are thinking 1 hour is gone and you are seeing, just 5 minutes has gone. That means it's a very dragging experience. That means the thought of you going through that experience is so much that you are away from that. And this happens in a very tough experience. So therefore, probably in Naraka, you may go through 1 day of Naraka only, but it will drag for a long time, 1 year maybe. In Swarga, you go through 1 year, but it's 1 day. That means it is like a very, very happy experience. And imagine, all the time is calculated with reference to sun only. That is why we say Brahmaloka is 1000 times this or 100 times this. Everything is calculated with reference to earthly hours only. So the concept of time is directly associated with sun. What is time? Time is a gap between two experiences. Correct. Time is the gap or interval between two experiences. For time, for space, for causation, there has to be always two. Space is the distance or the gap between 2 points. Measurement of time is between two experiences. Measurement of causation is between a cause and effect. Two has to be there again. So there has to be always two. When you go to sleep, there is an experience. When you wake up, there is an experience. In between, there is a time. And how is this time calculated?
By the rotation of the sun.
Unit. Unit is second. That is probably it's probably why it's called second. Second means second experience. But its calculation is based on the grand movement of the earth and sun and moon, whatever it is here. That's how the calculation made. From there you can bring it down to millisecond also. From there you can take it to light years also. The whole thing is, meaning if this beautiful orchestration of movement with reference to sun is not there, calculation of time is not there. Right. So therefore, in the North Pole, if you will find, actually,
6 months a day.
it is 6 months is a day. For polar bear, we say, how can it sleep for 6 months? It's not sleeping for 6 months. For it is only, it's only a half a day that it's doing. Because it's sun is there continuously for 6 months. And then sun is not there continuously for 6 months. So it's actually 1 night and 1 day. So if somebody says Swargaloka is somewhere around there, it is not hard to believe. It's not. It's exactly the opposite is there in the South Pole with reference to Pitraloka. Now,
It's the same, sir.
huh?
It's the same in the South Pole.
It has to be. I mean, when we
Not
look at
opposite.
science that way, yeah, it is the same. Even
Pitraloka is one
with
of the
reference
better
to the thing in because in the north we see sometimes Helsinki and other thing goes more towards the North Pole. We see longer days there, not unlike Australia or South Africa here. But it has to be the same. Maybe if we know the time of Antarctica, we will be able to
There's less land there.
less land. So we cannot really understand with reference to human experience there. So whenever there is a shrinking of time, it can be taken as a very happy state of mind. That is why we experience absolute bliss in deep sleep can be related to this. That there actually time stops and you are in perfect bliss. And as long as you are able to merge the mind into an experience and you are into it, you actually forget time. So a very happy experiences like that and dragging experiences like that of a hell. So even if you are able to understand it this way, that a person will go through happiness in such a way, then heaven and hell are understandable in that context also. It is understandable. So if you say you may not believe in lokas, you have to understand how the experience goes. So realm of experience is heaven and hell. So heaven and hell can be understood with reference to your experiences in this world also, but we need not confine that scope of the heaven and hell to this alone. The existence of other lokas that way is not ruled out. And what you can go through is, of course, it's not relevant in this context, but Vedantic theory of perception talks about how it is created, where Swami Ramtirtha concludes in a way that the projection of the supreme entity which we see as this world here, in the same way you cannot rule out the projection of other types of worlds also, he says. You cannot rule out. So being here with my experience is the ultimate. I cannot say nothing else beyond this exists. It is a very, very not a broad-minded thinking. It is a very narrow and limited point of view. So Brahmaloka here refers to the Kramamukti. Yes, sir.
So we do good and bad deeds throughout our lives,
Right.
and good will get you heaven and bad will get you hell. And 5 good and 2 bad doesn't adjust. 5 will give you that. So why do we say he will go to heaven or hell? So then probably the person should go to heaven and hell.
5 and 2 may adjust also. That's why I am saying before the fructification of the fruit, if it is a mixed bag, you will get accordingly also. Once the fructification happens, it may not. See, you may just remember this story of Yudhishthira going through to heaven at the end of Mahabharata. He goes through a phase of hell and then he is going to heaven, right? So he says, for whatever lie you said or whatever you have to go through this. But eventually he goes to heaven, which is where he belongs to. It is possible like that also. That 2 you go here and then 5 you go there. It's possible like that also. But if suppose you did some conscious negative act, but you realize that, and you are putting 100 actions as a prayashchit karma and other things towards nullifying that effect with that genuine concern and thought flow, why will it not get nullified? It will. So the results of all this 100 will get you 100 minus 1 or whatever be the effect. If it is powerful enough for 50, 100 minus 50 you will get it.
In mantra 2, when we say Tyagi Naike Amritatvam, means some get Amritatvam through Tyaga. So, am I right in understanding that verse 3 is explaining this only?
No.
Or is it something else?
In mantra 2 he is saying Dhanena Tyage Naike. By renunciation of wealth, some have attained this. So what it means is, there we explained that Dhanena refers to every experience with reference to this world only. So by renunciation of any value towards world, by establishing themselves in higher thought, some have attained this. So
Then what is the difference between mantra 3 and this? Dhanena Tyagi.
It is basically same in terms of sannyasa yoga only. So what he is talking about is with reference to the word na karmana na prajaya. So that means not by doing any pravritti action, but by renunciation you can do.
So it's the same.
It is the same. So that the emphasis is not by doing meritorious deeds that there is a direct cause towards self-realization, but it is only by knowledge. And knowledge of the higher is equivalent to renunciation of the lower. That's how we can take it.
Sir,
Yes, sir.
sir, we often relate death as an experience of deep sleep,
Like a deep sleep.
like a deep sleep.
Yeah.
Okay. Now in deep sleep, truly speaking, all this, the mind, the antakarana, everything gets merged into the current, means goes to, inside the Atman. Then it is the soul. So there is no possibility of any experience whatsoever in deep sleep. But we do say when after that experience, like he's going through hell and heaven, how is it possible then?
So death is sleep. So in the sleep you can go through dream or deep sleep. So in after death also you can go through the realm of heaven. After that also you may go through extreme unmanifestation. We don't know that. So it is not just that after that you may go into unmanifest state also. That is not ruled out, as it were, as far as this individual is concerned.
The second question is, like when I talk about the law of karma, we say that it is one-to-one basis. Like if I do it physically, you get it physically. You do it mentally, you get it mentally and all.
Right.
Now, how is it then that any act which is done physically gets converted into, means there is a migration in between from this world to the dream world also? Like what I am saying is, you said that only in waking state, whatever is there, at times it gets fructified in dream world. Now, it's like dream world is sort of a mental type of thing.
Right.
Now, in the law of karma, when defining the law of karma, we said that is 1:1. If you have done harm mentally, you will get agitated. If you have done harm physically, you may fall down, break, and this 1:1 in mental to mental, intellectual to intellectual, physical to physical.
Right.
Now here we are seeing something which is like an act done in physical is getting transformed into a mental form.
With reference to the dreamer, he has a body, it is physical only. So what you go through as excruciating pain, meaning there is no experience without that form of a body. When you wake up, you know that it is all part of your mind. Now the equation of physical to physical, mental to mental means, if a person, you are doing harmful things at the thought level, idea level, that effect will come to you at the intellectual level or the thought level. The moment you are hurting somebody's feelings by even your feeling inside, it will affect you at the feeling level. You further it by acting, that you go ahead and hit him or kill him or something, that is going to come back to you at the physical level also. So physical level is nothing but the extension of the karma at the thought level, like that only. So to that extent that you are putting karma, to that extent you will reap the consequences of karma.
That's okay. To that extent, it is coming back to, because it has to come back in the same proportion.
Yes.
It cannot be that you hurt a fly and you get a punishment which is doomed for hell, okay, forever or something like that. So what I am saying is,
Even the question of hurting a fly, with what intention you do really matters. That's what I'm saying. So you cannot just say it is hurting a fly. A person can have an extreme cruel thing and torture and kill a fly, or by mistake you would have killed a fly, or for whatever, unintentionally he could have killed. All these are different actions altogether.
exactly, the bhava behind the action.
Bhava behind the action, correct.
Determines it. But here it is something like, it gives an impression that if you act physically, you may get.
No. Dream is nothing but your undigested experiences of the waking world. So certain things that, suppose you have an intense desire to fly, etc., where you cannot physically fly, you may dream as though you are having wings and flying, something like that. So what cannot be exhausted here? That is why the scope of extreme law of causation is also not there in the dream. You can do anything like that what you want. So it is just the undigested thought flow which cannot find fructification or exhaustion here. They find it there. So it is in the realm of your activities only it will come. That's all I am saying.
One more question.
Yeah.
So when we say that nobody is doomed forever permanent, okay, now when we talk of self-realization, the ultimate sadhya mukti.
Yeah.
And if a man is, by doing practicing or Singapore, he reaches to a level of Kaivalya mukti, he is still short of the ultimate pinnacle.
No, Kaivalya Mukti is direct liberation. It is.
Direct liberation, okay.
It is full.
If a man is practicing towards all attempting all, trying all his efforts and everything to reach self-realization, and if he attains Sadhu Mukti, I mean, if he attains Kaivalya Mukti, not Kaivalya Mukti, sorry,
Krama Mukti.
Krama Mukti, if he lands there, he is still not reached the ultimate. Still he is short of that. If he has to remain in that state for so long a period of time, Brahma's days, Brahma's time, in a way, is he not doomed also?
No, doomed in the sense, say that's what it is. He is in the realm of, when we say the word doomed, etc., and you are going to be there, it is all towards the negative side, that you are going through agitation and you are going through this. A person who is in an extreme happy state of mind, and he is in that sort of immortal bliss, and he continues to be there. Nobody is going to complain. Why am I here like this? He is in that state. And after the end of it all, he has no rebirth. That's about it. So he is going from there to...
By doing like in Patanjali Yoga Sadhana, when you do dhyan, dharana and all these things, lot of siddhis come. But these siddhis are said to be sort of a disorientation towards the ultimate goal. Now, why this is not as a disorientation in the...
Don't confuse Patanjali's Ashtanga Siddhi with reference to this. These are two different things altogether. He is going through effect of his meritorious sadhana, which is a different realm of experience altogether. With reference to Siddhi power, it has no connection at all. A person can have all Siddhis and he can be very much bound towards the earth. That is something very different. So these two things should not be confused. Yes, sir.
Sir, when we are talking about Swargloka, Brahmaloka and Kaivalya Mukti, presumably the sadhak knows about all the three, okay, and he is doing his sadhana, hoping that he will reach a Kaivalya Mukti level. So even in case of a Dhruv, he finds himself between the Saptarishi, and then technically he may regret that, oh, why did I think of this and why did I not think of Kaivalya Mukti? So this is, in a sense, it is a limitation of the ego, which has not completely given up the...
No, probably the data you are giving is wrong, in the sense that there is no regret as far as Dhruva is concerned when he is sitting there. I heard it in a lecture, as he is finishing the tapas and going, the Lord is granting him this, and he is just thinking for a moment, oh, why I have not merged with the Lord just now and then, but then he says, this is Lord's will, that he has to continue as a king for some more time, and then he will continue in the Dhruva Mandala or whatever it is. So, there is absolutely no regret or anything like that thought itself, because the ego for all practical purposes is dissolved. It is dissolved. And you can say the individuality, wherever it is, in the whichever loka it is persisting. But the ego that we talk in terms of a person who is having the thought of I and me, that sort of a thing is as though by total surrender tending to zero. See, in mathematics we say, when theta tends to 0, we say, right, in trigonometry, tends to 0 is as close as 0, it is as good as 0. Like that it is. When it is absolute 0, it is total realization. So there is no question of any regret or anything like that in that stage.
Yeah, no, my purpose was not to highlight the regret. What I am saying is, ultimately, there is a limitation. We can make a lot of effort, but we can keep on tending towards 0. But getting to 0 is a challenge.
Not a challenge anymore. There is no sadhana for him anymore. He has finished all his sadhana. He is just floating in the air there. What is the problem? When the feather is being carried on by the wind, it is just going through that. That's about all. But we are always recommended to keep the focus directly on the self and achieve it here and then. Because we do not know what and how and when, because the resultant is not in our hands. So just focus on thought towards the self. That's about all. For him, that is the resultant, and then from there he is going. There's no question of any effort or anything after that as it is.
So, but then isn't it that the chance of getting Kaivalya Mukti much faster if you go to Swargalok and come back and then get Kaivalya Mukti? Because in the case of Brahma Mukti, you are still there for X million earth years. But if you get a Swargaloka, you come back after maybe 100, 200 years, come back to earth, and then straight away go for liberation.
What is the guarantee? If you had that capacity, why will you first go to Swargaloka
It's
itself?
also a desire. The desire to get Kaivalya Mukti also is a...
In the first place, why did
But it is again desire again, isn't it?
no 1 minute? In the first place, why did you not ask for Kaivalya Mukti? Why did you go to Swarga?
No, the effort wasn't good enough.
Then you will go to the next step. Then you will, in 200 will become 300, but still it's an improvement. Yes.
So the desire for Mukti, that is also a desire, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It will be a hindrance. So as long as any obsession or any type of desire that is there, that is going to be a hindrance towards the self. As far as we are talking about a person here, he has definitely crossed all these things. Yes.
Question: is bliss neither a state of happiness or sadness, and is it a state of nothingness, or is it a state of happiness?
Bliss means happiness. Happiness. And with reference to deep sleep, we go through a state of nothingness, but actually we are experiencing bliss. Only thing is we are not aware of that bliss at that point of time. When you wake up, you say that it was a great thing, a very happy feeling. But at that point of time, we are not aware. Vis-a-vis, the state of self-realization is Ananda, bliss, absolute bliss, where you are aware. You are awareness personified, as it were. It's total awareness. It is bliss. Bliss means not a neutral state. That bliss cannot be, that Ananda cannot be equated or understood in terms of any bliss that we go through here. So it's a different kind altogether. We'll conclude with the bhajans here.
Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti